The elevator smelled like rain and cardboard and something warm. The lunchbox Serena Holt had been carrying since 7 that morning. She hadn't eaten yet. It was noon, and the elevator in the Callaway Tower had been stuck between the 14th and 15th floors for 11 minutes. Serena counted. She always counted things when she was anxious. 11 minutes. 42 floors above street level. One stranger standing in the corner who hadn't said a word since the lights flickered. She looked at him sideways. Dark coat, no tie. The kind of posture that came from years of people moving out of your way. He was looking at his phone, but the screen was dark. Just staring at it, like the phone had personally offended him. "It'll move soon," she said, not because she believed it, because the silence was starting to press against her ears. He looked up, not at her, at the elevator doors. Then back at his phone, Serena shifted the lunchbox to her other hand. The metal handle had left a red crease across her palm. She'd made vegetable soup that morning. Her grandmother's recipe, the one with the smoked paprika, or the barley that took 40 minutes to cook properly. She'd gotten up at 5:30 to make it because it was her first day as a contract courier for the building's internal mail system, and she'd told herself she would not spend $12 on a sandwich from the lobby cafe on her first day. She set the lunchbox on the floor beside her bag. The stranger's eyes moved to it. "Is that soup?" he said. His voice was lower than she expected. "Barley soup," she said. "My grandmother's recipe." A pause. "It smells like something my housekeeper used to make." "Used to? She retired?" Serena nodded. Outside the elevator, somewhere in the shaft, something clicked and hummed and then went quiet again. The lights stayed on, which she chose to take as a good sign. "I'm guessing you're not in a hurry," she said. "I'm always in a hurry." He finally put the phone in his pocket. Today it doesn't seem to matter. His name, she would learn later, was Adrian Mercer. And Adrian Mercer was the kind of man whose name appeared on the glass doors of the 42nd floor. Mercer Group, spelled out in brushed steel letters, and who had not ridden a standard elevator in this building in 3 years because he used the private one reserved for executives which had been under maintenance since Tuesday. His assistant had reminded him twice. He had not listened. He was also at this precise moment deeply and inconveniently hungry. He looked at the lunchbox again. "Don't," Serena said. He blinked. "I didn't say anything. You were looking at it the way my brother looks at food that isn't his." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, more like the memory of one. "How long has this elevator been stopped?" he asked. 13 minutes. You're counting?" "I count things. It's a habit." She paused. 14 now. He leaned back against the wall and exhaled slowly. She noticed his jaw was tight. The kind of tight that came from a specific kind of stress, not physical, not the elevator, something older than that. "Rough morning?" she asked. He looked at her properly for the first time. Serena Holt was 28 years old, wore her courier ID on a bright orange lanyard, and was looking at him with the particular directness of someone who had never once had reason to be intimidated by a man in a dark coat. "Board meeting," he said. "That bad?" "They've been trying to push me out of my own company for 4 months. He said it flatly, like he was reading from a report. "Today they think they finally have enough votes." Serena was quiet for a moment. "That's your building," she said. "On the door upstairs. Mercer Group, yes, and they're trying to push you out of it. Apparently founding something doesn't protect you indefinitely." She sat down on the floor of the elevator, back against the wall, lunchbox beside her. After a moment he looked at her like she'd done something surprising, which she supposed she had. "My feet hurt," she explained. "I've been on them since 6. He said nothing. Then was the most undignified thing Adrian Mercer had done in recent memory, and something about it felt oddly like relief. "How long have you been a courier?" he asked. "Today is my first day." A pause. "It's also my birthday." "I know," she said. "Very glamorous. How old?" 28. Same as this elevator probably, based on how it's performing. This time the almost smile became an actual one. Small, quick, like it surprised him too. The lunchbox was right there. "Could I?" he started. "No," she said. "I'll pay you for it. It's not about money. It's barley soup. My grandmother taught me to make it." "You can't just buy barley soup. I haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon." Serena looked at him. He wasn't performing hunger. There was something genuinely worn around his eyes, the kind of hollow that came from skipping meals because your brain wouldn't let you stop long enough to eat. She sighed. She opened the lunchbox and handed him the container of soup and the spoon she'd packed, and she sat back and watched Adrian Mercer, CEO of the Mercer Group, eat her birthday lunch on the floor of a stuck elevator on the 14th and a half floor of his own building. He ate the whole thing. She watched him do it. She didn't say a word until he was about 3/4 of the way through, and then she said, "You realize that's all I had." He stopped, looked at the container, looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said, and he genuinely looked it. "I'll have my assistant arrange. It's fine." She waved her hand. "I'll get a sandwich." $12, first day, not what I planned, but here we are. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and held out his card. She didn't take it. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you just ate my grandmother's birthday soup in a broken elevator. That's already a strange enough day. I don't need your card." He lowered it slowly. "What do you need?" "For the elevator to move." She checked her watch. "I have a delivery on the 31st floor at 1 o'clock. As if it had been listening, the elevator shuddered, groaned in a deeply theatrical way, and began to move. She stood, he stood. They both looked at the doors. "Happy birthday," he said. "Thank you." She picked up the empty lunchbox. "I hope your meeting goes better than expected." He didn't answer. She glanced over and saw the tightness had come back to his jaw. Whatever the elevator had briefly dissolved, the 32nd floor was already reassembling it. The doors opened on 15. A maintenance worker was standing there with a radio and an apologetic expression. Serena stepped out. She was halfway down the hall when she heard him say, behind her, quietly, probably not to her, probably to himself, "It won't." She kept walking. She thought about him on and off for the rest of the afternoon in the distracted way you think about something you witnessed but didn't quite understand. She delivered 14 packages, memorized the quirks of 3 different freight elevators, and ate a $12 turkey sandwich in a stairwell on the 27th floor. It wasn't barley soup. It wasn't anything close. At 3 o'clock, a woman named Philippa, sharp-eyed senior dispatcher, the kind of person who knew everything that happened in a building the way a building itself knows, stopped her in the courier room. "You were in the elevator this morning," Philippa said. "When it stopped, 14 floors up, about 20 minutes, Serena said. "Someone should look at the cable mechanism. You were with Adrian Mercer." Serena set her bag on the table. "We were stuck in the same elevator. I wouldn't call that being with him." Philippa gave her a long look. "He called down to the dispatch room. Asked your name." Serena paused. "Just your name," Philippa said. "Didn't ask for anything else I thought you should know." Serena nodded and said nothing else. She picked up her next batch of deliveries and went back to work. She did not think it would lead anywhere. People asked names for all sorts of reasons: to file incident reports, to tip properly, to satisfy a vague curiosity that faded by the time they got back to their desk. She was a contract courier on her first day. He was the name on the 42nd floor. She was wrong about where it would lead. But she wouldn't know that for another 3 weeks. The second time she saw him was not in an elevator. It was in the building's second-floor cafe at 7:15 in the morning, 11 days into her contract. Serena was waiting for her shift to start, sitting at a corner table with a coffee she'd budgeted for, $4, oat milk, no syrup, and a notebook she used to keep track of delivery routes. He came in through the side entrance and went straight to the counter without looking at the menu. He ordered what sounded like black coffee, the most deeply unimaginative option available, and then turned and saw her. He stopped. She watched him process it. The orange lanyard, the lunchbox on the table. Same one, different contents today. The notebook. Recognition crossed his face, and then something else she couldn't quite name. He brought his coffee to her table. "This seat taken?" he asked. "You all, technically," she said. He sat down anyway. "How's the contract going?" "Good. I've learned which freight elevator skips 11 entirely and which one has a door that takes an extra 3 seconds to register the button. Useful knowledge." He looked at her. "Did you eat today?" "I have soup," she said, gesturing to the lunchbox. "Is it your grandmother's?" "It is." "What kind?" "Lentil. With lemon." She paused. "Don't even think about it. I wasn't going to. You were calculating your odds." That surprised a real laugh out of him, brief and slightly rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a while. She found herself wanting to hear it again. "The board meeting," she said. "How did it go?" The laugh faded. "They voted to restructure my role. Officially, I'm still CEO. Practically, they've reassigned most of my operational authority to a committee chaired by a man named Gideon, who has been with the company for 2 years and thinks quarterly projections are more important than the people producing them. Can they do that legally? They have lawyers who say yes." He turned his coffee cup slowly. "I have lawyers who say it depends. What do you say?" He was quiet for a moment. "I say I spent 11 years building this company from a 2-person office above a dry cleaning shop in Hamilton, and I'm not sure I recognize it anymore." Serena looked at him carefully. "Is that about the company or about what you had to become to build it?" He looked up at her. "Sorry," she said. No." He shook his head slowly. "That was exactly the right question. I just haven't heard anyone ask it before." She didn't know what to do with that. so she opened her notebook and went back to her roots. He sat with his coffee until his phone rang. He stood to go, then hesitated. "Serena," he said. It was the first time he'd used her name. Philippa must have told him. "Thank you for the elevator." And he gestured at the table, at the conversation, at something that didn't have a clean name. "You're welcome for the elevator," she said. "I didn't do anything for the conversation, that was just talking." He almost smiled again. Then he went upstairs. She told herself, firmly, that this was the kind of thing that happened in buildings, brief connections in transit, pleasantries between floors, nothing that accumulated into anything real. She was wrong about that, too. It accumulated quietly, the way good things often do. Coffee, twice more, coincidentally. Then, not so coincidentally, she noticed he timed his mornings differently after that, came through the second-floor cafe at a more predictable hour. She noticed because she was a person who counted things. She started bringing 2 cups of lentil soup. She told herself it was practical. He started setting aside the second chair when he arrived first. He told himself it was courteous. Then came the morning in the 3rd week when she walked in and found him sitting at their table. She was already thinking of it as their table, which she knew was a problem, with a cardboard folder open in front of him and an expression she'd learned to read as something went wrong and I can't show it publicly. She sat down and didn't say good morning. She slid the second soup across the table. He looked at it, then at her. "What happened?" she said. "Gideon's committee has recommended my full removal. Formal vote next Thursday." He said it quietly, without drama. "They've documented what they're calling a pattern of unilateral decision-making detrimental to shareholder confidence." "And what is it actually?" "Me overruling their decision to close the manufacturing division in Windsor. 340 jobs." His voice didn't waver, but something behind his eyes did. "We could have saved it. I'd restructured it 3 times before, I know the numbers, but it didn't serve the quarterly targets, and Gideon's committee doesn't see past quarters." Serena was quiet for a moment. "So you protected 340 people," she said, "and they're using it to remove you. In simplified terms, those aren't simplified terms. That's just what happened." He stared at her. "The vote is next Thursday. Even if I fight it and win, I've seen what this company becomes when the board decides short-term optics matter more than long-term integrity. I'm not sure it's worth fighting for anymore." "Is this you thinking out loud?" she said. "Or is this you asking what I think?" He looked at her. "What do you think?" She took a breath. "I think you've been fighting so long to keep the company that you forgot to ask whether the company is still the thing you actually care about, or if it's just become the fight itself." Silence. Outside, the cafe filled with morning noise, coffee machines and elevator chimes and the low murmur of a building opening for the day. "My grandmother used to say," Serena said, "that sometimes you hold on to a pot so long it burns your hands, and you end up protecting the burn instead of putting down the pot." He looked at her for a long time after that. She had the distinct, unsettling feeling that something had shifted. Not between them exactly, but in him. Like a thing that had been braced against a wall for a very long time had decided, quietly, to stop bracing. The Thursday vote happened. Serena wasn't there for it. She delivered 41 packages, navigated a malfunctioning freight elevator on the 9th floor, and ate her lunch in the stairwell again. At 4:15, walking through the lobby with her last batch, she saw him. He was standing near the front doors in his coat, holding nothing. No folder, no phone. Just standing, the way a person stands when they've recently been made lighter by the removal of something very heavy. He saw her. "Well," she said. "I resigned," he said, "before they voted." She stopped walking. "Adrian, it was the right decision," he said it calmly. "The Windsor division is protected for another 18 months under the terms I negotiated. I made sure of that before I signed anything. The rest," he looked up at the Callaway Tower's glass ceiling, "the rest is theirs." She stood there, holding a package addressed to the law firm on 31, a woman who counted things and made her grandmother's soup and had told herself firmly and repeatedly that this was nothing. This was a man in an elevator and a borrowed chair and coincidental coffees. "What will you do?" she asked. "I don't know yet." He looked at her. "What are you doing after your shift?" She hesitated. "There's a place on King Street," he said, "that apparently makes the closest thing to proper homemade soup I've found in this city. I haven't been there yet. I thought." He stopped. "Tried again. I thought you might know if it's worth going." "I've never heard of it," she said. "Neither have I," he admitted. "I made it up so I had a reason to ask." Serena Holt, who was 28 years old and practical and careful and very good at counting things that mattered, stood in the lobby of the Callaway Tower on a Thursday afternoon and laughed. It was genuine and warm, and it echoed slightly in the marble lobby, and Adrian Mercer looked at her like it was the best sound he'd heard in a very long time. "My shift ends at 5, she said. "I'll wait," he said. He did. They found a place on King Street that did in fact make good soup. Not her grandmother's, but good. They sat at a table by the window while the October dark fell over the street outside, and they talked for 2 hours about Hamilton and Windsor, and things you build and things you let go, and the particular stubbornness of barley in a slow-cooked broth. He offered to pay. She let him, because it was a restaurant, and that was reasonable. And she was 28 and practical, and she knew the difference between a gesture that meant something and one that was simply convenient. That one meant something. 6 months later, on a quiet Saturday in April, Serena stood at the window of a small unit in the Kensington Market neighborhood, where the morning light came in sideways and the smell of coffee had already filled the kitchen. On the counter was a lunchbox, the same battered metal one, a little dented now, and inside it was barley soup, her grandmother's recipe, made for 2. Adrian was at the table behind her, reading the paper like he'd been reading papers at that table for years, which he hadn't, but which felt, in the specific way of good things, like something that had always been true. "You're counting something," he said, without looking up. "Light through the window," she said. 14 squares on the floor. He looked up. "Anything interesting?" She turned around. "Just that it's a good morning," she said. "That's all." He looked at her across the kitchen, the lunchbox, the soup, the 14 squares of April light between them, and the expression on his face was the one she'd been watching develop slowly, carefully over 6 months, something that no longer had the shape of bracing. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is."